It's crazy how much your frame, I guess is a good word for it, can affect people's outlook of you.
Yeah, like your frame of reality.
Yeah, where you're like, I'm having a heart attack, and they're like, oh my god, yeah, we'll help you. Whereas like, hey guys, no worries. My wife told me to come in. It's probably nothing, and then that guy dies.
Yeah, because no one took it seriously.
Yeah. Well, I think like, I don't know, we were kind of talking about this. I don't know if this is kind of a different subject, I guess, but we were talking about like victimhood. And like, I think that's part of it is like when you feel like something is happening to you, like how you react kind of like frames your reality and frames how everybody else reacts around you. And we were just kind of talking about how like a lot of, I don't know,
PC
like,
word for it.
A lot of like a lot of people,
human beings,
let's say Gen Z. I like that. A lot of people in Gen Z, I would say, are really into like being a victim and like owning their victimhood, and like that's what gives them a badge and like scar.
Well, there's something interesting too, because justifiable victimhood deserves help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you have a legitimate disability, we should help you. And I guess there's a certain contingent of the population who saw that happening and were like, I want the rewards, but how do I get it? How do I claim my victimhood? Because I'm not in a wheelchair. I'll figure something out. Yeah. And so like this slew of maladies and issues and victimhood claiming attributes show up now, because there is a power in getting people to pity you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the first time in history too. If you think about the last maybe 100 years, before that, there was no value in being a victim. Like if you even, maybe not even 100 years, even like 30 years ago, like in the, let's say the 60s, there were enough real victims at that time. And like if you came out to your boss and said, hey, I'm having, mental health issues, that was like, yikes, why do we hire this guy?
Oof, you're fired.
Yeah, exactly. Or, whatever the case may be. And I do think, like you said, a good amount of that is healthy. The fact that we have swung the pendulum to being like, hey, we accept whatever it is that makes you a victim. Like we as a society are much more sensitive. There's so many good things, but I feel like it's going to correct. I feel like there's too many people, like you said, that are seeking victimhood rather than just like working through their inherited victimhood. I like to think of it as, you guys ever watch America's Got Talent?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
I think of it as like the America's Got Talent effect. Like the first time I watched that, like a couple years ago, it's just like a fun show about, people doing singing and whatever, doing magic shows and whatever. And then every year, someone comes in with a very compelling story, who is probably usually about the same skill level, but ends up winning because the judges just like, drool over this person, like, oh, you lost your dad when you were a kid and you've had this long journey. And that feels good, especially at face value. You're like, wow, we gave the person who had the hardest journey, we gave them the victory, and everyone like pats himself on the back. The problem is, over the years, those people are becoming everyone. It's like a competition now. When it's been a couple years since we watched it, but like the victim status has increased. And so now, like, instead of it being like a skills competition with a couple people that have really compelling stories, it's like you can't get in without a compelling story. And so it's like, okay, so whose victimhood wins here? Because the one we watched was like there was like someone who lost their parents, and everyone was like, okay, yeah, let's go with that one. And then someone who had transitioned and was now a woman, and like, oh, let's go with that one. And then it was like this weird subjective thing that stopped being about the talent and was like, there was this underlying layer of, well, if you have a good story, you have a massive advantage. And I don't know, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, and it
It makes me think about Simulacra and Simulacrum by Baudrillard. Did you ever have to read that in school?
I don't know
Is
what
that-
that is.
Well, simulacra, the simul part of it is the root word of simulation.
Hmm.
So simulacra and simulacrum is his theory that human society is this progression of simulations, or copies of copies. And the question is, are we copying reality when it comes to mass media, or is mass media creating reality and we're copying the media? One of the famous examples he uses is the tumbleweed, so you see tumbleweeds. Whenever you think of tumbleweeds, you think of Westerns. And you're like, yeah, like two guys shoot out, tumbleweed rolls across the town. There were no tumbleweeds in the Wild West. Tumbleweeds are from Russia, but they're an invasive species that was brought in to the United States much, much later when they were filming Westerns. And so we saw tumbleweeds in TV and thought, that's what the Wild West looks like. So now when they film Westerns, they bring in tumbleweeds to make it look authentic. But they're just copying a copy of the movie that was copying the Wild West that inadvertently had tumbleweeds. It's really interesting. He uses the pumpkin spice latte as an example also, where it's like, here is pumpkin, the taste of pumpkin. And we created an artificial taste to make pie, a fake pumpkin to say. And then someone copied that fake pumpkin taste and added a cream or a spice to make coffee out of it. And this thing tastes nothing like this thing. It's just a progression of copies. And the reason it made me think about that specifically is the America's Got Talent, I don't know, syndrome, is that a good word for it? The America's Got Talent pattern is, the question is, did they watch the first seasons and see someone with a great story and we're like, that's how we make television, and decided to recruit more people? Or are people seeing the video and coming up with this stuff, trying to copy what they did to try to win? Or is it just that there's so many people with great stories that now we're seeing a larger contingent of those people apply for, who knows?
Or even that, like, a large contingent of the people who were contestants did have a good story, but like before it wasn't necessarily part of how you won the competition.
They didn't know they were supposed to bring it up.
Yeah.
And then they saw someone do it and were like, oh, I should do that.
Yeah, like that.
And
that
it gets
them.
Progressively more and more ridiculous every time you copy something. It changes the original, like the banana flavored Laffy Taffy. Tastes nothing like bananas, but it's a banana that doesn't exist anymore. Also in the same article, I believe, the same journal, where he talks about how there was a different type of banana that existed in South America that they made a flavor of that doesn't really taste like that banana. And then that species of banana went extinct. And then everyone copied that flavor of banana flavoring for candy. And that's why we have those disgusting Laffy Taffies that taste nothing like bananas.
Yeah, it's funny because you can see this kind of go full circle sometimes too, where it's like, we have a pumpkin, we made it into a pumpkin pie, we made a pumpkin pie latte, and then we made a pumpkin pie latte lifesaver. You know?
Yeah, they literally have those.
They have stuff like that. That's like the flavor.
Pie latte cookie.
Yeah, like I think of this with like Legos, for example. Like they have a Lego video game of Lego version of something else that's made up. You know,
Star Wars,
like, yeah, Star Wars. It's like, hey,
and then they make Lego sets for Lego Star Wars.
Yeah,
like
it's
from the levels of the game.
It gets so, yeah, exactly. It's like someone knows a little bit about space, which is a real thing, and made up a story that is a fake thing, then someone in the Star Wars, and then it became such a big phenomenon that it was almost as if it was real, you know, almost as if these are characters that you could copy and you were copying a real person. Because then it was like, we're going to take these fake characters and we're going to make Legos out of them, and then we're going to take these fake characters that are Legos and make a video game out of them. And it's like, wait, what am I watching? Lego Harry Potter video game? This is so many levels of fake things, you know?
And then they made a movie about the Lego characters and then sets about that movie. Yeah, it's I think the biggest thing he talks about is with the onset of mass media, it happens more often, and there's a danger to it because the idea of what is happening, are we reflecting reality? Because art is a reflection of reality, or are we creating reality? Or is it happening simultaneously?
Yeah.
For example, like the rom-com
Yeah, I was
movement
gonna
of
bring
the
that up.
early 2000s and 90s era,
Mhm.
we have all of these men doing these grand gestures to get the girl.
Like 80s.
In the 80s, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And
Mhm.
it hasn't really stopped, but there is a generation of children now who were raised with those movies existing, who think that's how I woo women. I need to do something crazy and grand. And it's like, no, you really don't. Don't do that. That is super weird. But they don't understand it. And so they do these crazy gestures and like singing at the football game or like bringing these 10 dozen roses to this chick they hardly know because it works in the movie.
Well, it keeps being perpetuated.
Yeah,
too.
well, and
Yeah.
then people hear those stories and make reality TV shows or make a movie about the story. And so simultaneously, reality is being represented and crafted.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
That's really interesting. It reminds me of I don't remember where I heard this, but I was listening to something one time that was talking about what is it down in Louisiana, the really famous area
New
where
Orleans.
New Orleans. Yeah, New Orleans. It might have been you who told me this. That was like
Probably.
New Orleans when it was destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. When they rebuilt it, they basically rebuilt it based on what they thought it was like, rather than just rebuilding it. So it was like rebuilding it based off of its, like you were saying, like its
Representation.
representation rather than actually rebuilding. So now it's like a caricature of what it was
What-
really like.
It's
Yeah.
insane. Yeah, if you go back, it's like, am I at Disneyland?
Well,
Kind of.
I think that happens on a minor scale, even internally within one person. Like I'll give the example of a TV show. The obvious one is The Office, where it's like, hey, we made a season and Dwight was this way and it was really funny and people loved it. So keep that up. And then the next season, they're like, okay, how was Dwight last season? Oh yeah, he was like, wasn't he like really like manly about things and like really aggressive? Yeah. Oh, people love that. Okay. So now they're copying what they did the first time. And then he's like
Yeah.
even more manly and more aggressive. And I think you do that. Like especially when you add a pinch of insecurity, you do that even in your own head. Like,
Mm.
like your identity. You're like, okay. So I don't know where it started, but at some point I became this person. And then I've just kind of been looking back and copying that. And like I said, when you add insecurity to that mix, then you're like, oh yeah, people liked me because I was on the football team when I was in high school, and now I'm 35 years old, and so like I need to copy that same thing. Like I should be a football coach, or I should like I love University of Utah football or whatever because that's who I'm trying to copy, and that's what made me cool then.
That idea of that you were telling me about the other day, how people dress for when they felt the coolest.
Yeah. I think we have talked about this.
Did we already talk about that? Oh.
But yeah, like people stop progressing. Like mostly like adults, I would say, older than we're adults.
Yeah, like
but
if your parents were cool in the 80s,
yeah,
you're gonna be
they, like,
wearing 80s.
wear the 80s clothes, and you like, yeah. And I think it's cool to think about, like, you felt the happiest and the most good at this point in your life, so you're continuing to copy that. But I feel like true progression is being able to say, like, does this still work for me?
Maybe
Like,
I should let my hair go
is
gray.
maybe I should let my hair grow gray, or like something that's been big for me, like moving out here, is like before we moved, I like got headshots and I was ready and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go and like audition and be an actor. And then like I got here and just like started looking at stuff and I was like, do I really want this, or is this something that I'm like identifying with because I've always identified with this since I was like a kid? And like reflecting internally and just kind of deciding ultimately that I'd like rather direct and rather be in charge and like figure things out than like worry about what other people think of me for like the rest of my life. You know, it's such like a vanity thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
That's something I think about all the time. It's actually it comes up as a theme almost in a lot of my podcasts. It's like abandoning your dependence on your identity.
Your preconceived notions.
Yeah. And again, I think that it's very natural to have that internal compass because it's safe. You know, it's like you decide how you are, and then you you don't decide how you are, actually. I think you just kind of at some point end up as a way, and then you just decide to continue that way because it's easier to default than to wake up and be like, look at the the limitless possibilities of the things you could do and be, and how vast and scary that is, and how much risk there is. Bruce Lee, I think, is the one who says that you should be like water. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that, but it's like, I don't remember the exact quote, but what I got from it is like, water fills up any container that it's in. Water freezes when it's cold, but boils when it's hot. Like, too many people are ice cubes, that are in the heat, and they decided that they were that way, and they're not really adjusting and changing and evolving to their life. They're just trying to make the world evolve to them. And they're like, well, I'm already this way. And so like, I'm just going to be an actress. And if that means a part of me is, there's cognitive dissonance there. That's like, well, this part of my head wanted that, but like, I don't like it or whatever. And people just face that cognitive dissonance and they just pound it into the ground because it's so much scarier to be like, I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
Like, maybe I might be a director. I might be a real estate agent. I've already decided on this path. If I change now, it's like I could literally be anything, and that's too scary. There's too much failure. There's too much risk. And so people just
wonder how aware of it people are. Like, if it's a conscious decision, because I feel like a lot of people have issues looking inward. Mm-hmm. Like, something I've been reading about a lot recently is the idea of epistemology, which is the study of one's beliefs and like why we believe and how we came to terms with a belief. And it's really interesting. There's like a process that you can go down to take like your core beliefs and break them down to their core elements and find out that like, oh, I think this because my parents thought this because their grandpa did this. Maybe I should change that. Being a lot more conscious about how you think about stuff and like where you decide to end up with your own, I don't know, identity. A lot of it has to do with truth too and reality. Like that quote from Chernobyl, it's constantly in my mind, where he's like, whenever we lie, we incur a debt to the truth. And at Chernobyl, we paid that debt 1,000 times over. Mm-hmm. And it's like every time you lie to yourself or like you push something off and I don't want to open my possibilities to this. I know that I'm going to be a real estate agent no matter what. You're actually like affecting your psyche instead of moving organically or trying to break it down and find the actual truth and be like, I don't like real estate. I don't know why I decided that. At some point, something back in my past influenced me to do this. Maybe even simulacrum, like a copy of a copy. I watched a movie and these people were successful and happy. And I looked at my parents and thought, they're not that. So I'm going to try to be a real estate agent.
Yeah. Or I think even like acknowledging, like I think a lot of people, specifically our age, have issues with acknowledging a job for face value. Like saying, this is a job that I'm doing because it pays for my life. And it doesn't have to be like the thing that I want to do forever. I feel like there's such a weird disconnect between like having a job and being like, no, I'm going to do this for a while. And it's just going to turn into my life, and like being like, okay, this is working for now,
I think one of the biggest issues there is with capitalism.
Yeah.
Well, capitalism ties your identity to your profession very strongly because since it's so competitive, every second of every day needs to be making capital, monetized. So it's like, oh, you like to draw? Go to school for it, become a designer, make money doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure. Oh, you're at home with your free time? You should be uploading your drawings to, I don't know, art studio, Instagram, get followers, get people to back you up. While you're at it, invest money in that, you know what I mean? Like every second of every day, if you're not monetizing it, you're failing.
I kind of wonder if that comes from like the generation before us. Maybe not the generation before us. I know with my parents specifically, they say that a lot. Like if I show interest in like anything, they're like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, go to school, get a job, work it out. And I'm just like, okay, like I like doing makeup, but I don't want to like do that for a living, you know, like I wonder if it's like I don't know, like they had to work jobs that they didn't like, so they want you to find something that you're passionate about and like go for it and do it.
That quote from John Adams. My father was a farmer, so I could be a lawyer, and I'm a lawyer, so my son could be an artist. It's really interesting, like it's like the progression of what you want out of your employment. Like the people of the Great Depression were like, I need a job. I need to eat. Anything will do. And then when they have a job, they kind of instill in their children, and the children are like, well, I don't want to just to survive. I need something steady. I can't just be jumping from here to here. I'm going to get a job at a factory, work there for 60 years and retire. It's steady. It's perfect. I'll move up the ladder if I want to. And then the next generation of children were like, I need a job that is fulfilling for me. Like, I'm not just going to go to a factory. I need a job that I like. That's good. I should be like a lawyer or like something that goes out there. And our millennial generation goes even one step further where it's like, I don't care about the money. I want something that I like to do. I'm going to be a painter. I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to be a medieval poetry expert. Who knows? I don't know. It's really interesting to think about.
Yeah, and the next generation is like, I don't even want a job.
Yeah, exactly.
Jobs.
No, I totally know what you're talking about. And I think that the bubble's going to pop. I think this is something I've actually thought about a lot. You think about the previous generation, like you were talking about, and in retrospect, you can see these blatant, toxic ideals in every generation, right? And you look back and you're like, and you do that same pattern you just did, right? You look back on the 50s and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you guys thought being sexist was totally fine, right? And then, you like go to the next generation and then you look at them and, they told you to go to college and to get a job and to put your head down and, to stay there until you got your pension. And now this generation is like, man, how toxic of you guys. You don't believe in people expressing themselves and fulfilling themselves and whatever. And I think every generation comes to the table thinking that they have finally found nirvana.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my gosh. What?
They figured it out. No.
Yeah, they figured it out. And they're like, they show up, and this is the same thing. I feel like that happened way back when after the Great Depression. And they're like, oh my gosh, our parents were so dumb. They thought that they just needed a job so they could eat. When you could get a factory job and you could work there for 30 years, they were so stupid. Like, how toxic. Like, this is the way that mankind will thrive. And to the next generation, it's always like, and it's not just work, it's also, race. You look back on previous generations, you're like, what the freak did you think about race? Like, you guys are so racist or so sexist or, whatever. How the world is finally peaked. That's what every generation feels like. And what I like to think about is how is every type of mindset and ideology, specifically, let's use the example of parents, how is it toxic to the next generation? Because every kind is. You look at a religious family that thinks that, hey, we're religious. There's nothing, this is the pure truth. And then their kids are like, what the freak? I can't show my ankles. I can't have sex. I can't drink, like I can't choose for myself. So then the next generation is like, okay, free love. Everybody, you can have sex, you can drink, you can do whatever you want. We're not going to tell you what to do. And those kids grow up and like, Mom, what the freak? I didn't know you had to be disciplined.
I need structure. Yeah.
I need structure. And so we have a baby and I keep thinking like, man, like what? I could not mess this kid up because I already know everything. I'm like, I'm going to let him choose. I'm going to let him be confident. I'm going to have him be open-minded, and I'm sure it won't fail. And it's like, yeah, it's going to fail, like you just can't see your own toxicity while you're in it.
Yeah.
Well, the way you presented it honestly made me think about how we, like, the oncoming process of generations is just a long cyclical thing. You know what I mean? Like, especially like conservative to progressive, where you hit a stride of like, no, we need to knuckle down. We need to do things right. We need to, bring it back to the roots. We need to be tough. We need to be disciplined. And then that hits the next generation. They say, I don't like that. We need to be free. We need to be loving. We need to be open-hearted. We need to be loose. And then the next generation comes full circle once again. Like the roaring 20s into the Great Depression, into the 50s, and then into the 60s and 70s, big craze change, then into the 90s and 2000s, which were pretty conservative, and to the 2010s, which were coming back around. It's just like people have short memories.
Phases of rebellion.
Well, just the nature of a next generation is a rebellious act. You're going to come to the table with different problems than your parents had starting out. And no matter what, that fact makes it so you can never fundamentally relate. We're children of the internet. That's something our parents weren't born with. They were born with different problems. And so they did things in a completely different way. Just the parade of generations is in and of itself going to be rebellious no matter what.
Well, I think honestly, the key to being a good human and probably a good parent, I don't know, we don't have any kids, but it's just empathy. It's just thinking okay, this is my perspective, this is how I feel, but I'm going to take myself outside of that and think about how my kids feel and all these different things, or this other person that I don't know on the street that just cut me off in traffic, but maybe they're late for work, or maybe I did something wrong, trying to take yourself outside of your own head.
Well, I totally agree with that. And but what's interesting is think again, how could that be toxic?
Yeah.
Because it could, you think that something couldn't be toxic, and there's for sure levels of toxicity. An abusive parent is more toxic than an overly loving parent. It's but an overly loving parent can still be toxic.
Well, you're going to screw up your kids no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so it's so if you're going to screw them up, how you choose how you want to screw them up. So I choose empathy. I agree with you completely there, but it is interesting. For example, I know someone, I'm married to this person, and her parents were so loving that they didn't let her fail. She succeeded and succeeded and succeeded. And it's not like she didn't do it herself, but there was no chance that she was going to fail. She had this net, and then she hit the real world. She went to college, and it was that's too much empathy, maybe,
protection.
There's something. And it's kind of freaky. You can't avoid it. And I don't think necessarily you should try to find the perfect way to not ruin your kids, because you'll probably end up making it worse.
One of the nice things about having two parents, though, is you can hit them with different philosophies. Because I was just thinking about the empathy thing prepares people to be abused in a way. Because there are bad people out there who are going to take advantage of people. And if you have a big heart and you try to always look at things from other people's point of view, and you run into someone who is manipulative, sociopathic, or dangerous, they're going to get you. There's this chick at my work who's very nice. She's 19 years old.
Woman?
She's 19 years old.
Okay.
And she has a big heart. And there's this other woman who lies about her age, but she's 30 and is a real piece of work. And everyone can tell, I think, except for this girl, had no idea. And she was trying to be nice to her. She would give her rides to work because she had no car. And then she was homeless for a while. And she was like, I really need an apartment. So she's like, well, I could front you the money and you could get an apartment and then pay me back. She was like, yeah, that's a great idea. You give me the money for my deposit and then I'll totally pay you back. She took $700 from this girl and vanished. And it's like, oh, you were so nice. You were so kind. Yeah. You were trying to be a good person and you got burned for it.
What I have basically come to the conclusion of, because there's not really a conclusion to come to, is that whenever there's a question of, how you should be on a spectrum, specifically when it comes to like personality, like empathetic versus like cold and sociopathic, right? Mm-hmm. One thing that is comforting to me is that it's always in flux. That's what's nice, is because you don't have to be a certain way all the time. And when you realize that, it's a lot easier because you're like, oh, it's always now. I'm always deciding where along the spectrum this situation should lend, the best outcome for me or the best outcome for the situation. Because it's like, if you're like, okay, I've decided, like we're talking about before, if your identity is, I am always empathetic, I've got such a big heart, that happens. Where if you're the other way and you're like, I'm Mr. Baller and I walk over people all the time, then you equally run into many problems and no one likes you. It's just like the real trick is to realize that you should be constantly changing along that spectrum.
On adapting. Well, and honestly, empathy might not even be the issue here with that girl. It might just be the naivety that was brought on by empathy.
Yeah, lack of world experience.
Yeah, because you could feel that lady's feeling and understand her pain, still be empathetic toward her without being taken advantage of. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that's really rough. I don't have money to give you, and I don't trust you.
So maybe it's having empathy in your reaction and then being like responsible with your action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're like, I feel for you. Tell you what, why don't I show you how to go apply for a personal loan? Or I have empathy for your situation. Let's go look at a cheaper apartment, one that you can afford.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to pay for it, because if I pay for it, unless I have the money and don't expect it to be paid back, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, oh, could you lend me this money? Yeah, I'll lend it to you. I'll give it to you because I'm not expecting anything.
Well, and like what I feel like I have a very similar experience to Maddie in that my parents did not let me fail. And also that they like kind of, if I didn't want to do something, I didn't have to, which is not helpful for being an adult. Like the other day I went to the DMV and there was it was a 2.5 hour wait. It was a long time. And I got there and I was like, oh, I don't have to do this if I don't want to. This is stupid. I don't need a driver's license. Blah, 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 blah. And then I was just like, no, you need a driver's license. You can't function in real adult life without an ID. And so I've had to train myself to make myself do things and not just opt out because someone will take care of me, having to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And I feel
with this generation, it seems, again, exactly what you're saying. Like, it seems like, oh, hey, we finally got it. And while you're in it, you can never notice what's toxic about it. But it makes me think the next generation, like, what do we focus on now? And how could it be toxic? Because in one way or another, it will be. And, we tote all these positive things, and I'm not saying that they're negative. I am saying that they will have some kind of negative that we can't see now. So we're always talking about empowering change and, giving everyone a voice and equality and all these things. And I think those are all good, but it makes you wonder, just hey, this is my kid. I'm going to love them, not let them fail. It seems like it's all good. In some unintended way, I wonder if there's going to be negatives in the future of like we said, we didn't think that victimhood would become currency like it has.
Mhm.
And that came from positive things, right? It came from us helping people who were legitimate victims.
Yeah.
I wonder what the unintended negative consequences are going to be from the positives that we're trying to enact now. The way that the culture is now, like the next generation of kids are going to be more racist or something, or like, I don't know. I mean, because you can't see it while you're in it, but
Yeah.
it makes you wonder.
I feel like it's a lot about mitigating losses, because like there's going to be a trade-off no matter what you do. But if you can try to get as little of negative out and as much positive, that's probably your best bet. Like trying to predict it and being like, okay, maybe I'm screwing up my kid in this way, but it's better than screwing up in this way.
Yeah. That's why, like we talked about when you guys were down here, that's why I just have like a couple of like pillars of how I want to raise my kid.
One.
Yeah, if I could remember what they were, it'd be really helpful. Because it's like, these are the pillars of everything I will do to raise my child, and I can't remember one of them.
Well, the elasticity clause that they have in the Constitution comes to mind too, where it's like, I got these pillars of raising my child and all these ideas of what I should do, but I need to have a little bit of wiggle room here, like a fallback that says, hey, when new problems rise, I'm not going to be stuck to my ways and saying, no, this is the way to raise a kid. Doesn't matter what the kid's like. You got to be able to adapt and flow like water.
I think another issue that people run into when parenting is doing something because it's the opposite of what their parents did, and not necessarily because it's a conscious choice of like, it's the choice of like, I don't want to be like my parents, rather than saying like, why did this affect me in a negative way, and why am I having a negative reaction to this?
Well, that's epistemology right there we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Where you take a moment and consciously address why you believe something or why you're trying to do something. And you break it down to its core elements. Where a lot of people don't do that. They don't even consciously do the opposite of their parent. They just think, oh yeah, I remember not being happy and I'm going to make my kids happy.
Well, that's even more conscious than most people even are.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, somehow I ended up in this life. It's like, who's this woman I married? Who are these kids? Why did I start driving this car? Oh, well, we'll see tomorrow.
It's very true, though. We kind of just like fall into patterns and traditions or random patterns of behavior without ever consciously thinking like, why am I doing this? Why do I think that it's a good idea to spank my kid? I don't know. I never even thought about it. I just do it because the kid annoyed me or the kid was acting out, and this is what worked.
I think that's part of the reason they say when you get older, the years pass faster. And I think this is just a theory. I have no idea. But I think when you're a kid, there's basically the conscious and the unconscious in the way that you think, right? So like when you're analyzing a problem, that's your conscious mind. But when you're on default, you're in your routine or you're just doing your habits and you're walking to work, getting your car, whatever, that's your unconscious mind. And I think as a kid, you have no routine, you have no habits, you have no identity. You're completely organic, flowing through the world, and everything is conscious because you're learning everything. You're analyzing and observing everything. And it's like, oh, these are friends. This is a house. These are clothes. Oh, I wear boy clothes. Okay. And then you like get older and older and older. And then as you get older, you start to pick up things that you move from the conscious to the unconscious. Like, okay, I don't really need to think about what I watch when I turn on the TV like I did when I was a kid, because I know every Saturday night I'm watching Friends or whatever. And it starts to become a routine. And then over time, you're like, okay, well, I don't need to think. Goes back to what we're saying about identity. I don't need to think about who I am every single morning like a little kid. Like, I dress these clothes, I wear these things, I drive this car, I go to this job. I live in this house. I have this, trajectory in my life. And over time, especially when you have no more progression built in, like you're out of college, you're just kind of enduring, so to speak. I think a lot of people hit that age, like our age, like 30s, and they've moved so much from their conscious life where they're deciding and they're deliberate to their unconscious default life. And that's why I honestly feel like the years pass faster, because you don't notice things that are on default as much. Like when you're driving home, you're just driving and you're like, oh, hey, I was thinking about something else. I'm home. But when you're looking for a home, you're like, okay, what street is it? You know? And I
Yeah.
think that change, and I think what you should do is start moving things slowly back to the conscious, like be deliberate. Habit is good and routine can be good, but can also be like crippling. You want to be living deliberately and experiencing and observing and living consciously, instead of just like, oh yeah, like I decide what I do. You know, every Tuesday I decide between tacos and ground beef. It's like, my life is great. The reality is almost everything at about 30 years old is on default. And I don't think that's good. I think you reverse that.
Well, and something that can be scary too is if your default is set on faulty premises, like you never consciously broke down your beliefs, your core ideals. And so what you end up just doing without consciously thinking is poisoned, I guess is a good word for it. Where you're like, I don't know, if I'm trying to think of a good example. And I think the mega thing is on a lot of people's minds. Like the idea of these thoughts and these beliefs, this racism, where does it come from? And it's like, oh, it's just something I never really addressed, you know? I just unconsciously consumed this media that put my thought in a specific direction. I fell right into the political party of my parents and just went to that stuff because that's what they did, and let someone consciously sway my mind and use me as a tool to pass their policies or to fulfill their agenda, because I wasn't consciously aware of my beliefs.
Yeah, like your psyche being formed from specific events.
I think Clifford talks about it in his paper called The Ethics of Belief, where he talks about these nets of people who have no, what's the good word for it? Conscious belief, not a critically analyzed belief, that are utilized by negative elements in government a lot of the time to make change. Where it says like, hey, I didn't think about my belief, but I believe it because Joe believes it, and Joe believes it because I believe it. And the two of us believe it, and that sways our other neighbors because look, we're all neighbors. We all believe this thing. And none of us looked into it. And we created this network of people that we justify each other based off of testimonials only. And no one has looked into it. But we don't need to, because we all are friends.
We all like trust each other.
And someone can hijack that net and say, I want to build an oil pipeline here. And I know these people will believe it as long as I target what they believe, because they don't think about that stuff. They just vote red.
And those who are conscious are the ones who are controlling those who are unconscious, right? Like, and this applies to just about everything. Like they say, there's a quote, hopefully I don't screw it up. When a man with experience meets a man with money, the man with experience leaves with the money, and the man with the money leaves with the experience, right? Because like a person who has a higher level of understanding with something like money, or like you were saying, with like an ideology, a political party, can come to someone, a group, a mass of people who don't understand or who never thought to even think about it, and can easily persuade them. And then because they are consciously, they're like, I'm aware of my political views, or I'm aware of my, you know, my understanding of money. So if I go to a bunch of people who aren't aware, I can see the ways that I can manipulate them. You know, that's why people fall for like pyramid schemes and stuff like that. Is because the person who does the pyramid scheme is aware it's a scheme, obviously. But obviously they can't target people who are aware that it's a scheme, you know? And I think that same pattern happens a lot. You know, it happens with schemes, it happens with politics.
Well, sales, the plight of the salesman is that good salesmen can sell anything, but good products sell themselves. So if you have something like core, fundamentally good, objectively, you can just say facts about it and people will buy it. But if you're better at presenting, you could sell that really good thing amazingly. And then any company could take you because you're good at presenting and go, hey, this is shit. Sell it like that other thing because we know you can. And now you can't trust salesmen because they give you the same feeling. They tell you in the same way. They feel so assured. They feel so confident. And you're like, yeah, okay, I'll definitely get that. And then it's garbage.
Mm.
Well, that's
because you're not thinking, they're consciously doing it.
Yeah, like that's the problem with again, back to politics. If someone, what I see happen a lot is that somebody who has not come to their belief through deliberate thought, someone who didn't realize they ended up unconsciously or by default to their belief has like a, what's the word, has more confidence that they should have in their belief, despite the fact that they came to it without deliberate thought and without real evidence. So you see
the
people,
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, exactly. That's the word I was trying to think of. What is it? Dunning-Kruger?
Yeah, Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, because exactly. Like the people who know the least are the most confident, and the people who know the most are aware of how little they know compared to all the knowledge that there is on the subject. So it's like, oh my goodness, I see this so much with politics. So everything's about politics now, but it's not just that. But like, oh my goodness, like the internet trolls are hilarious on both sides because they'll come out. The people who come out swinging and hard are usually like just kind of confident, foolish, like full of piss and vinegar, and haven't really sat down, because it's more complicated than just like an angry rhetoric. It's if you come out that hard, then you probably don't get it, because there's more nuance to it than that.
Yeah, it's more gray. It's like generally those people don't actually have all the information. They've been given like buzzwords or a quick little infographic about something.
And we're in LA, which is the heart of Dunning-Krugerdom.
Dunning-Krugerdom.
Dunning-Krugerdom, you know what I mean? Where everyone is like, I moved here from a Midwest town. I know nothing, and I'm going to be famous. And you're like, doing anything about the process? Or doesn't matter, right? I'm still confident. Woo! I don't even have an apartment.
It sucks because a lot of those people, if they're confident enough, their ignorance is so blissful, they end up winning.
It's true, though. It's because you have a doubt when you get to the audition. You're like, okay, am I doing this right? Am I moving in the right way? Am I emoting? And the confident dumb person is like, I don't know what's happening. I just rolled up and I was like,
whatever.
There's a fire. Sale.
Oh my
a fire
God.
sale?
There's a fire
sale. And he's like, do you want to maybe back off a little bit on that one? Not so aggressive? No.
Nope.
Want to try it a little differently? No thanks.
No, but you're right. Like, so the example I have with this was Portuguese, right? When I learned Portuguese, I got very obsessed about perfecting it, because anytime you learn a language, it's very insecure, right? It's like, because you sound dumb to everyone. Everyone just thinks you're dumb, no matter what.
Like
I'm
a
like,
kid. Yeah.
Hola, ¿cómo te llamas? And like, this guy can't even talk, and it's unconscious. People don't mean to do it, but everyone does it. When someone's speaking your language and they don't know how to speak it, try as you may, it's very hard not to judge them, which is why it's so hard to learn a language, because pride. And same thing was true with me, right? I was like, I'm not dumb. Like if we were speaking English. So anyway, so I got very obsessed with like, I'm going to like perfect this language so I can feel confident and like I can be smart finally in this language. And so I would like obsess over the details and the grammar and the accent and the whatever, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of the other people that were learning Portuguese didn't do that at all. And like when they were doing public speaking, for example, they were better. They were honestly better than I was, because, well, maybe it's other reasons as well, but a big part of it was I was so aware of the mistakes I could make and the flaws and how how bad I was in comparison to a native speaker, and they had no idea. They thought that they didn't even realize they had an accent. So they'd go up like and just like burn through it, and no one cared.
Het Van Dag.
Estamos aquí, and they did awesome. And it's kind of like, shoot, maybe I should have had more ignorant confidence, you know?
I was thinking about, oh God, I don't remember which philosopher or whatever wrote about it. Might have been Lacan, about the astrologist and the astronomist. Remember? Astronomer.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about what you were saying a second ago, where it's like a lot of this confidence, these internet trolls come with buzzwords and come with like sound bites that sound cool and are easy to remember or that rhyme. And they were this guy, whoever it was, famous writer dude, was talking about how on TV they brought together this astronomer and this astrologist. And they were like, we're going to solve the heavens. We got this legendary debate put together between the astrologer and the astronomer. We're going to find out which one's real. And and then you guys are going to vote.
No, I hate where this is going.
And the astrologer kicked it out of the park. Everyone was like, yeah, astrology is the shit. Like, everyone knows that if you're a Pisces, you think like this. And if you're a Gemini, you think like that. And it's like, yeah, because the astronomer went 2 years of study. He spent, college and doctorate to actually understand what's going on in space. That's not something you can just like get out in a 30-minute television program. There's tons of fundamental core work that goes into it. Whereas the astrologer, there's nothing. It's all just flash and mirrors, but that's so much easier to digest. And when you, the layman, is put in a position where you're supposed to decide, and the media which you trust has presented these two things as equals, you think, oh, well, this one makes a lot of sense. He's really appealing to me. I didn't know I had to make a decision, but now I picked the astrologer. And it's crazy how much that happens. I think that's what politics has become.
Yeah. People, they don't realize what they're competing, what the standards and the grading, like rubric that they're competing on a lot of the time. Like, for example, classic one is music. Like, oh, look at me. I am an amazing musician. I, play the viola, and, whoever, I can't even think, Miley Cyrus or someone, like, okay, yeah, she's fine. But like, my voice is like perfectly tuned. I'm just a better musician. I studied for years to have perfect pitch. And how is it that she became famous? The world is so unfair, and you see that with basically every single medium, right? Like, I know everything about film. How is it that the Emoji Movie made millions of dollars? I know everything about music. How is it that Cardi B is the #1 person, on the charts? And literally you can go down through just about anything. Yeah. And it's because they are looking at the wrong scale. They're looking at what they think the scale is, which is proficiency, but it's not proficiency. It's more like acceptance.
Yeah.
It's like
popularity.
Right. Popularity. And popularity is powerful and good and makes the world go round. Like, if people will spend money on my popcorn and they won't spend money on your kale, even though the kale on every metric is better except for popularity, then I still win.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's necessarily good in all instances, obviously, but I think a lot of people go through a lot of pain because they're looking at the wrong metric. I'm a better actor. Why am I not as famous as like this idiot Logan Paul who's in all these movies, or whatever? He's not, but you know what I mean.
Actually, with the acting example, I've had this conversation with actors all the time, where it's like, where do you put in your work? Where do you try the hardest? And a lot of people are like, oh, I'm gonna go get my college degree in theater, and I'm gonna know everything there is to know. And like, yeah, but that doesn't guarantee you anything, and especially not if you're an asshole. You know what I mean? Like, being likable is so important. Being able to work with people, being like having good first impressions.
Yeah.
we run into so many people down here who are like, I don't understand why I'm not making it. And then you see them in the audition room, they're like, hey, just so you know, no nudity, no swearing. I really can only be dressed in red. Are you guys writing this down? And it's like, I mean, it's good to have standards, but like, don't come out the gate swinging like that. You gotta be professional, but you gotta be likable.
All nude, any color, every scene I will be smoking a joint.
Yeah, it's like, I have no credentials. I got no anything, but I want a trailer. I want a Jaguar. I want me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be a dick to you. Like, you guys are so stupid.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I think like in that instance, your editorial you is like focusing on like what you can get out of something instead of what you can give to the situation.
Yeah, Willem Dafoe said that it's best if you are viewing a movie, you are just one paint on the paint. What is that thing called?
Palette?
Palette. You're one paint on the palette. You're adding to this big piece that is a million moving pieces. And if you think of yourself as the piece, you're going to fail. And no one's going to hire you because you're part of a working clockwork here. You're not the main event.
That's so
That also what you were saying about like the people who, you know, go and learn everything about acting and then they're mad they don't get a role. You know, there is a disproportionate value given to certain skills in anything. And it is kind of sad because the people who have those skills kind of run the world. Like, I mean, way up there, likability. You know, like
yeah.
the most famous woman, Jennifer Aniston, probably at some point at least. Like, what is she actually the best at? She's not the sexiest woman. She's not the best actress. I mean, she's good at all those things and she has a good combination, but it's just like, I just like her. She just like, seems like she could be a good friend. And it's the weird thing though, is that I think it's kind of I'm not sure, a theory. I think that the subjective skills, and like I said, likability is probably number one, just like people skills, the way you present yourself is disproportionately valued because that's what other people can see, as opposed to like hard skills, you know, like software engineer or like writer or creative or really anything, plumber. Those are like hard skills. I think even within the hard skill centered industries, in the objective world, the subjective ones still win most of the time. You still, a lot of the time, hire the plumber that you like more, even if they're not better. The guy who ends up as a CEO is not the best salesman, was not the best leader. He's just the guy that, and I know it's not perfect, but I think it's disproportionately valued.
Yeah.
If we were to try to diagnose why that is, I was thinking while you were talking, about how the subjective skills, there is no training manual. There's no numbers, there's no data. Whereas anyone could sit down and become a computer engineer. They could. All the information's there. It's like when you're playing chess. All the pieces move this way. That's all they're ever going to move. If you have a great memory, you can memorize every single move that is possible, every single gambit, every single trap, and you can win every game. But the ability to be social dynamics, likability, things you can't measure, things there's no rule book you can just hand someone and say, here, memorize this. Can't be taught, are so much more valuable because they can't be taught. You have to just figure it out.
Yeah, like from a social point of view, and even like kind of like pinning it even like more specifically, I'd say like likability, like turned up is like relatability, like being relatable to other people so that they can see themselves in you and then want to form a relationship with
Empathetic.
you. Yeah.
I mean, the idea of asking versus kissing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Have we talked about this already? We're obsessed with this right now.
It is so interesting.
Tell me about it. I think, is this the thing you posted about?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I want to hear your perspective on it. So give me the background.
So a little background. The original post was this guy saying like, oh, my friend wants to come stay with us in New York. They keep asking to come like hang out in our apartment and live here, and I don't know what to do. How do I keep putting these people off? We've said we're going out of town. We told them we were redoing the front room so they couldn't sleep here. We said there was mold. What do you guys think? And everyone in the post was like, just tell them they can't stay there. What are you doing? He's like, what? That's so rude. I'm not going to do that. And so one of the commenters came out and said, oh, this is a classic issue of asking versus guessing. There's two completely different cultures of people that exist right now. Askers and guessers. There are people who ask for things directly, and there are people who guess a lot. And he provides a bunch of examples, like with parents. A lot of the time you had a parent where you could go, hey, Dad, can you drop me to school? And he would be like, no, I'm busy. Or, yeah, sure. But there's the other side of that same thing with the guesser, where it's like, oh man, gotta be at the school tomorrow at 1. 1? Yeah, 1 o'clock. Are you doing that hair appointment tomorrow? Oh no, that's Tuesday. Oh, cool. I don't really have a way to get there. Oh, you don't? I'll drive you. Thanks, Mom. Let's go. And we realize that guessing, a lot of people say, oh, asking is just being confident. Guessing is just being not confident. And so you ham and haw and wish around, but it's not true. They're completely different tools for different reasons.
I think it's interesting that you gendered both of those responses, because in our experience, at least, and with other people that we've talked to, women are generally guessers and men are generally askers. And like there's tons of exceptions to that. That's just general.
I mean, that's conservative Utah upbringing.
That's true. That's
our sample size.
Yeah.
That's what I've found as well, for the record.
But there's reasons for it.
Well,
guessing is more polite. Guessing is empathetic. Guessing is like the secret language of women that a lot of men have issues with, where they want things direct. They want things confrontational. And it's like, that is so rude. If you're dating someone, you're like, so I took you out. We have sex now?
No.
What? No, Jesus. What the?
You need to
of course
hint
not.
that.
But like hinting around stuff, or like being polite, recognizing other people's feelings, is the guesswork, the guesser's playbook. Where it's like, listen, maybe they don't want to drive you, but you could test the waters.
Yeah.
How are you feeling today? Oh, okay. I'm really in a bind. Yeah, I don't know how a way to get to school. I'm not going to ask you directly. I want you to offer, because I don't want to put you in a position where you have to do it, where you have to say yes or no.
Or you have to say no. Yeah, because like for guessers, rejection is like one of the worst things that could ever happen, which is so stupid. I hate it. I hate it about myself.
Well,
that I have to like, because
you didn't empathize good enough.
Yeah, because they had to say no. And that means I hate hearing no, so I don't ask.
And there's another angle to it as well, because Maddie is a guesser and I'm an asker, and we have like gone head to head about this now for 3 years. And I have learned a lot about the value of guessing. Like I was that same way too. I was like, oh, guessers are just like wimps. That's not true at all. In fact, askers can be a wimpy thing to ask, because it's just like I don't know how to maneuver this in like the social situation, so I just come out and ask. One thing that I found about guessers is that a lot of the time, something that is very considerate about being a guesser is that you give the other person the chance to be nice, right? Because as an asker, if I go up to you, hey, Dad, can you take me to class? Dad can either say yes, which is basically just me giving into your will, or no, which is rejecting. But if you're like, hey, like I gotta find a way to go to class, then you're giving a gift to the other person, which is, hey, you get to offer to me. You get to be nice. The other person's like, hey, I'll take you. And now they've done something nice for you. It's like if you ask someone for a present and then they give it to you, it's like not that nice. But if you like hint that you'd like a present and they give it to you, then now they've given you something instead of just like bent to your will. Does that make
Well,
sense?
and the
Yeah.
asker runs into a lot of issues with knowing when to do things in a relationship because they're expecting asking to be used to get them to communicate. So it's like you're going and you're going and you're going and suddenly get very frustrated. Like, why are you not doing the dishes? What? Nobody has asked me to do the dishes. I can do the dishes. Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, okay, sure. I'll do them. And it's like, I don't want to have to ask you. The dishes were dirty. I told you I was busy. I have been running around like a chicken with my head cut off trying to figure out all this stuff. And you're just sitting here doing nothing. You should have guessed and done the dishes. And it's like,
Yeah. I know there's like a fundamental disconnect. But I think like something that has helped me is like having you as an asker and being able to like be like, hey, I said all these things and you still didn't do the dishes. And then like the next time I'll just be like, can you do the dishes?
Yeah. Or in the place of business. Remember we were talking about that?
In business situations, like with my boss, like I was working like 45, like 50 hours a week. And I was like, this is killing me. I need compensation. And so I was like, oh, but I don't know. And then my
Hey guys,
was
I'm really
like,
tired. Or
Yeah.
I've been working a lot
But-
recently.
But then when I just was like, I need to be paid overtime, they were like, yeah, okay, yeah.
Well, a
like-
place of business is not a guessing thing. There's a phenomenon where women in generalization here, don't get as many promotions as men. And a lot of people have been trying to diagnose it about like, are they getting overlooked because of their gender? Is there like a bias towards men? Is it because of they're not as qualified? Who knows? And a lot of people knock it down to agreeableness or being guessers, where they're like, oh, I don't know if I deserve the promotion, but I think I do. I'll just hint to my boss that I would like it. Whereas the asker goes, hi, been working here for 12 months. Time for me to get a promotion. Can I have it? And they're not afraid of rejection, which is really interesting because it's something that I think is important for everyone, but especially young boys to learn. Where it's like, listen, you can ask for something and they can 100% say no, and that is okay.
Yeah,
Nobody has to do anything you ask them, but you can always ask.
it's valuable. It's kind of going back to what we were talking about not letting your kids fail. Is if they're a guesser, then failure is terrible. So of course you never ever want them to fail. But if there's some sort of nice hybrid of asking and guessing, then they can still be polite, but be okay with failure, like accept it gracefully.
And be able to recognize when a situation calls for you to be asking or when it calls for you to be guessing.
There's the extreme askers as well. And that's like the really insecure people. And I do find that is related with insecurity. I think asking in general isn't necessarily, but extreme asking for sure, where they're like,
or a social.
They're like, hey, like tomorrow I don't really have any way of getting to school. And like, I know like you're probably like super busy and whatever. And like, yeah, I'm not trying to make you do it or anything. And I'm so sorry for even asking. And like, you know what? I'm just going to go. And like,
I mean, that's almost more of a
like
guesser though, because the
asker, sorry,
asker,
did I say asker?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I meant to say guesser. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, the
That
extreme
probably
guesser is a
made
lot
what I
from
just
insecurity.
said very confusing. No, I meant to say guesser.
The extreme asker is so confident that they're like, hey, I like this couch. Can I have this? No. Oh,
Yeah.
all right, cool. Whatever.
What I meant to
Can
say,
I
yeah,
sleep
sorry.
tonight? I don't have anywhere to go.
Oh, and if you meet people on the extremes of either end, it can be very weird. Like extreme askers. Sorry, yeah, what I just said was the exact opposite of what I meant to say. Guessers, the insecurity. Extreme askers, it's like, whoa, like what? Like,
If you're at
I
a
don't want
party,
to say his name on air, but there's someone that you guys know. And maybe if I tell you the story, you'll know who I'm talking about. But I
Okay.
had this friend, not that close, semi-close friend, like 3 circles of close, right? Like friend of a friend. And one time he left his phone in my car because we went to something as a friend group, and or his charger or something. And he's like, hey man, I'm gonna come grab my charger. Is that okay? And I wasn't home, and I was like, oh yeah, sure. Like, let me get home and I'll meet you there. And he got there and he's like, came over and grabbed it. And he's like, oh, hey, yeah, it's right here. Like opened the car door, went in, grabbed it. Because I didn't notice it was in there. Like, oh yeah, cool. All right, see you later. Like, okay, I'm just gonna, my phone's dead because I haven't been able to charge it. So I'm just gonna, can I just plug it in your house? Sure. And he came in, plugged it in. Like, this is the first time he'd ever been in my house. And I think the only time, and like plugged it in. He's like sitting there, just like me and him in the house. And he's just like waiting for it to load. Hey man, can I have some milk? Sure. I gotta go, but like enjoy your milk and your charging party. And I don't know what happened. I left and he just sat there. All right, see you later. You know, and it was like a little too, like you probably should have maneuvered the situation a little bit like, man, I sure am thirsty, you know?
Yeah. Like it's interesting to think about if he had been more, well, if he had been a guesser, he wouldn't have come in at all. He would have left because he would have understand that you were in a hurry.
When you said, I kind of have to go, that's his hint to be like, oh,
okay. Yeah. But if
no, go ahead. I'll watch the house. Don't worry.
It's cool. But if he was even like a little bit of the guesser, like being able to kind of like hint that he needed this, or like that might have even made you feel more comfortable to be like, oh, of course, dude, like come on in. Yeah, I'll see you later. You know, like
oh, I'm so sorry. Ooh, my phone is actually dead because I haven't been able to charge it. You have to run, I know, but
yeah.
What can I do?
Well, and like really extreme guesser would not ever be like, can I charge it in your house?
No.
Until they knew the answer was yes. They're basically lawyers. Well, lawyers never ask a question unless they know the answer is yes. So you move your way around until you say, did you kill him? But I do think a lot of asking and guessing is genderly tied, traditional gender roles, especially in conservative society, but it's also class distinction. Something that Calvin said about where he grew up in North Carolina is he didn't understand how to talk to girls in Utah because girls in North Carolina were like, you know what I mean? Like very direct, very much like, hey man, can I come over? Sure. You want to watch a movie? Not really. Cool. Let's do this. And the class distinction is that in polite society, upper class society, there are resources to go around. There is time for leisure. There is time for empathy. Whereas at the very lower bottom of things, when it's about survival, there is not time. It's like, hey man, I need to get to work. Can you take me? It's 5 minutes. If I lose my job, I will starve this week. Take me to work. You can't do it. I have to ask someone else. And this has to be fast. I don't have the time to be like, hello, evening.
Evening, governor.
Yes, my employment. Yes. You know what I mean? Like if you're at a fancy dinner party, you're going to be guessing, you know, like, oh, sorry. I really need to use the restroom. It's right over there. Instead of like, yo, where's your bathroom? You know,
it's an emergency.
It's an emergency.
No.
Hey, can I have this? This is cool. This is a nice glass. You guys have any booze? Oh, I need to get wrecked.
The clash of the two is very uncomfortable when you have a very guesser society, or even just like a family, you know, like two families that meet, or two friend groups that very guesser, and like again, in conservative society, a lot of times feminine and masculine, and they clash. It can be very uncomfortable because the askers appear very rude, and maybe they don't mean to be, and the guessers appear super bitchy, you know?
It's just like passive aggressive.
Yeah, it's like, okay. It's like no one told me where the bathroom was, you know? And it's like, well, it makes sense because if you're around all askers, they're gonna be like, oh, eventually she's gonna ask if she needs something.
Yeah.
I've found, so Maddie's whole family, they're very guessers. And I've found if you are able to communicate that way, being around guessers is very comforting. It can be very nice because you never are putting anyone out. It's never your fault. It's always, you know, like this combination of me having a problem and you having a solution rather than like me leaning on you, you know?
Yeah.
But if you can't, like if you don't have the social aptitude to know that you're around guessers and know how to communicate, it's like the worst. You're like, oh my gosh, like, no one's talking to me. Like, what am I supposed to, like, are you guys mad? Like, am I mad?
What's going on?
Can we go to the
Can I have a
bathroom?
soda?
I have to pee,
Yeah. I was actually specifically thinking about like the first time that your guys' family and my family, but and Maddie's family met for like the very first time. I think it was Maddie's like farewell,
Oh yeah.
like where everything first got together. And it wasn't like terribly uncomfortable or bad or anything like that. But I just remember kind of thinking like, okay, this is woo, all right. Like I don't know if I want to be in here.
There's another
like,
level to it.
Nothing bad happened, but it was just like, what is gonna happen here?
Well, and think about mom, who English is her second language. There's another level to that, where the nuances of guessing are difficult to convey in a different language, where you learn the language and you say, this is how I ask where the bathroom is. I can't hint, not yet. And so it's like, hey, my kids are on this ride. Can I just go in through the exit? Sure. No one's ever asked us, but yeah, go right ahead. Kind of weird.
I know their reaction is like, I figure if it wasn't a big deal, she wouldn't have asked so directly.
Exactly.
So I'm sure it's a big deal. Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, sure. Or the funny story that comes to mind, I'm sure Calvin won't mind us bashing him if he watches this. We do love Calvin. He probably won't listen, but anyway, we're at a party. There's a lot of people. All of us are guessers, or being guessers at least, because it's a social setting.
Social situation.
Yeah.
Calvin
should be a guesser, in my opinion.
Yes. Oh, every social situation. He's a big asker, and he was like, "Hey, have you guys seen the show The 100?" And we were like, "No, we haven't seen it. It sounds interesting, dude. So cool." Okay, so first episode, and he just starts going, and like, there's these people. They're on a ship, but they're gonna put 100 of them on Earth, and we're like, "That sounds really interesting. I'll have to watch it." Yeah, dude, you should totally watch it. So there's this guy, Jason, and his girlfriend, who's like an ice queen. Oh yeah, she's a real bitch. You would love. She's a great character. And they go down to Earth, and it's like, I guess I'll have to catch that one. Dude, you totally should. There's these people called groundlings.
No,
and
you don't have to watch
us,
it, man. First scene. Think of it, it's panning across space. Dun 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 dun. Introducing by BJ Novak.
Law and Order. Dun, dun, dun. I'm just a cleaning lady. Like, it was so bad. It was so bad. And like, every single person is getting uncomfortable. And he tells us the entire plot of like the first 3 episodes of this show, which we're never going to watch now because we already know what happens. I'm like, yeah, people are like, wow, I guess I don't have to watch that anymore. Like, someone's a good storyteller, and he has no idea. Just fundamentally cannot understand the guessing.
You feel so bad for people like that, right? Because it's really, really hard to teach. It's really hard to teach the nuance of like guessing, because you really only learn it through experience and being around people. And it's so uncomfortable when everyone is a guesser and there's one asker that doesn't know they're an asker, and they're just like going and going.
This pizza for everyone? Can I have a slice?
I don't know why that made me think of the one time I went to the chess club. Do you remember this, Michael?
The donut story? I
this is
really
like
quick. Tell Caitlin.
This is like the perfect example of an asker and why do I keep messing up? Asker and a guesser.
Yes. Yeah.
Michael was really good at chess, and I am not really good at all. And I went because Michael invited me, and I thought it'd be fun. He's like, "Hey, we have a chess club. Like, it's the beginning of the year, send off, like whatever."
Social. Yeah.
Yeah, and we go, and it's I don't know if it was a practice is the right word. That shows how little I know about chess. But we went. It was like the club. And we got to hang out, and there was like donuts, and we played games, and everyone grabbed a donut, and it was fun. And I went, and I hadn't even played a game yet. And I'm like, sick donuts. And I went. I was like, hey, thanks. And I grabbed one, eat one. It's looking around, watching everyone play chess, and this is so much fun. And I went and I had literally half of the donuts.
Oh my God.
Before, and I actually don't really remember how it ended, but I remember someone being like, "You have any donuts there? Have you played any chess?" I'm like, oh shoot, I'm not even part of this team. And I ate all of your donuts. And I didn't end up even playing, I don't think. I was just like, I should go. Sorry, I ate all your donuts and bounced.
See you guys.
Or think about Peggy and the cookies.
Oh yeah, I'm so embarrassed by that.
What happened with that? I don't think I've heard this story either.
Well, so the background to this story is how lazy, oh my goodness, I cannot even tell you how lazy of an eater I am. Like, it is insane, and it drives Maddie crazy. I'm like, Maddie, we need to get things that we can make quick. And she's like, okay, yeah, like I'll get like bread and cheese and, you know, like some seasoning. That's like the quickest thing in the world. Just make a grilled cheese sandwich.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you kidding me? I was thinking like a handful of almonds.
Yeah, I'll eat the bread.
Like
Like a
I guess
Pop-Tart.
it's like, it is so insane to me, my level of laziness when it comes to cooking. And I actually like cooking when I'm not hungry. When I'm not hungry, I don't mind it because it's just like a fun thing. But when I'm hungry, I'm like, what can this claw grab and put inside of me? You know? And so, oh man, I need to say that in the beginning because that justifies, I guess, the story because it's embarrassing. So I lived with my aunt. And again, I would just buy food. I'd go out to eat like every day and I had no money except for I worked at Panda Express. So I got food from there.
That
Thank
money.
goodness. I still am that way, dude. I just like eat out because I am so lazy with cooking. So anyway, I like had this weird thought that I like couldn't cook. I had my own kitchen in my aunt's house. I could cook whatever I wanted and there's no food in there because I didn't buy any food except for granola bars. And so like every day I'd like go look in their fridge and be like, no one's made me anything, like nothing I can just grab and throw in my mouth. And I found this cookie dough. Like I should have known it was like hidden because it was like in the bottom drawers, like way in the back and whatever. And so there's a good lesson to be learned here, you know, small daily activities compounded over time, just like every day. Walk down there and like grab a little bit and like, you know, check the coast is clear. And then like this big dinner came up, you know, like a month or two later with someone was in town and they invited me and they're like, who the heck ate all of the cookie dough? And I was like, surely that cannot have all been me. I only had like one bite a day for like 60 straight days. And it was like this big deal. They weren't mad. They were super nice about it. But I ate the entire thing. I didn't even realize it. And they had no cookie dough for the guest, like some special guest that was visiting. And I was like so embarrassed. And I ended up telling him, like, you ate that huge bag of cookie dough all by yourself. And I was like, you know what, guys? It's really simple. You just set a goal and you just do a little bit at a time. You can achieve as well.
Oh man, I can't believe you confessed. I don't know if I would have confessed at that point.
I think it was just too obvious. It was like I was the only person who lived there.
You look at Karen and you're like,
Me like have like chocolate smears on my face.
I don't
know.
I feel like there needs to be a phrase of like, I didn't raise any of you to eat cookie dough like this. And
they're all askers. Their whole family are like hardcore askers. Like some of the most, wait, am I sorry. I did it again. Guessers. Why do I keep doing that? Okay. They're hardcore guessers. And I was very much an asker. So I was like the wolf amongst the sheep for a certain amount of time. You know, can I have that? Thanks.
This is cool. Star Wars, huh? Can I have this?
Hey, can I put this in my room? Play with it?
It's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, and like there's not a lot of empathy when it comes to asking too, where you're kind of selfish. Yeah. A lot of things are about you. You don't take the time to think about how other people will recognize things. And that's a good value to have if you are like making your way in the world. When I was saying like it's good to be in business, there are women in business seminars where they take them and they teach them how to ask for what they want. Because it's so like coded in the traditional gender role to just be polite to be submissive, to be agreeable, to make sure you're not putting anyone out. And I don't know, it's really interesting to think about anthropologically, like if you dial it way, way back to survival times, which I love to think about. If you have like these cave people and there's way more women than men, and you have to interact with each other and exist in this society, whereas the males, especially the young males, just get put out in the world, be like, hey, go start your own colony because we've got enough dudes here. There's only so much resources to go around and men are expendable. Only the top dogs are staying, so peace, good luck. They don't take the time to be socialized. And that's a lot of what guessing is.
Yeah.
Like little girls versus little boys. You put the little girls on play dates together and they interact and their toys have relationships. Their Barbies are friends, or they go do activities together and they learn to be social as a little group. Whereas boys, it's like, here's a gun, here's another gun, go outside and pretend to shoot each other for hours, or shoot invisible enemies and don't even interact.
Yeah, it's interesting how much of it, like, I think it's hard to separate piece by piece, but how much of it is like societal influence and how much of it is like, that's just who they are. Like
True.
Nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, and simulacra and simulacrum too.
Yeah.
Like how much of the boy's upbringing is dictated by you copying what you think boys would like. Oh, these are boy clothes? Okay. Like you were saying before. Like, I need to get him a boy's toy. Here's a gun. Here's a car. Here's a G.I. Joe action figure. And then when they become old enough to start saying their thoughts, they say, I like this. And you're like, oh, this kid already likes this stuff. It's just him. That's who he is.
Yeah. Or like in my upbringing, homosexuality was not on my radar at all. Like it just didn't exist. I didn't know what that was. Wasn't on my radar at all. But like the kids that I nanny for, there's like, they have books for them now that talk about like this person has two moms or this person has two dads, and or there's like this like whole book about like feminism and stuff like that. It's like for kids, and it's so interesting that that is just normal for them. That's like nothing new, nothing different.
Well, it's interesting too, because that really wasn't something we talked about in our upbringing either. But Scotty is gay, and that came from him. You know what I mean? There wasn't a moment where he was presented a book and someone was like, hey, you can choose, you could be gay or you could be straight. It's just natural and organic, which is not necessarily true for everyone's coming out journey. I think it depends on whether or not you have an internal locus of control or an external.
You know, what you were saying, Caitlin, about how those kids are growing up with an understanding of like, this is normal, right? We talked earlier about how the way the world is now is going to be toxic in some way for the future.
Yeah.
And what I thought of when you were saying that, because my thought was what most people think, which is like, hey, we finally figured it out, right? Like we preach acceptance and we preach tolerance and we say homosexuals and there's no difference, and we should love them and all this stuff, right? And in my head I'm like, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I wonder if the unintended toxic relationship we'll have is that it won't be special, you know? Like maybe the next generation in a kind of, I don't know if ironic is an insensitive word, but in a very different way, the world, it will become normal. And that in a like a poetic way will be kind of sad. It's like, what do we have, you know, if it's so normal? And that's like the price of tolerance, I guess. And you talked earlier about choosing your negative, right? We would rather have, you know, tolerance but lose the sense of being special, than the reverse, intolerance and then rebellion, which makes you very special. Like we're the few, the proud. And I wonder if that will have an effect on future generations. Like, oh yeah, being gay is so normal. My friends that are gay, like it doesn't even matter, you know? And is that a good thing?
Yeah.
Well, there's already kind of a disconnect too between homosexuals who were from the 80s and homosexuals who have grown up now.
Mm.
Where it's like we were fighting the fight,
Like
we were
during
the
the
AIDS
AIDS
crisis.
crisis.
We're standing up against Reaganites. We have all of this pride and like this. We're in
like
a battle,
fire,
Yeah.
fuel. Yeah.
and then you get to nowadays, and it's like, yeah, we're in a battle, and it's like,
Not
against who?
compared to us. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, like, what are you
exactly. We
talking
thought
about?
AIDS
We-
was gonna take out
Yeah.
the entire population back then. Like, there was so much hate on gays during HIV, like the beginning of
Yeah.
that. Like, people hated Magic Johnson, and he's not even gay just because he had HIV.
Well, and it's not to minimize people's struggle now. Like, everyone has different issues, but they can't even relate a lot of the time. Like, we were
Just like a
talking about
different
how
thing.
sometimes in the gay community, people get frustrated with older white gay men
Mm.
because they have a specific complex about them. And it's like, whoa, that's so interesting to see that in this small subset of the group, there's already
more
division.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah. Well, and going back to like it becoming not special, I think, yeah, like you said, like I think that's preferable, is to have
Right.
tolerance and for things to become normalized. But the other part of it is that like it's gonna keep exponentially branching out, I think. Like the like 36 genders thing, or like the different subsets of different queer identity groups, or like people who just identify as queer, or people who are trans, or like there's so many different subsets that I think it's just going to like keep branching out forever.
Well, I mean, that's the nature of problems and of society. The
Yeah.
more we move forward, the more minutia, the more complex things get. Which is why the cry of a survivalist, someone who is a prepper, who wants the world to end so they can go back to romanticize things of the past, is a cry of fear, of not understanding the complexities of life. They say, stop the train, I want to get off, because I understand everything up to this point, but everything is going to continually get more and more complex from this moment on, and I don't want any of that. I'm just going to back out, just call it. I'd much rather go to a cabin in the woods and use the skills that I have and not have to deal with nuances of life.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, very narcissistic feel, honestly.
Yeah. It's kind of weird. I was gonna say something
What?
and then I forgot. Talking about changing. Oh, the Harry Styles thing. Have you seen this thing about people getting really mad that he wore a dress?
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well,
like Candace Owens.
I haven't seen it. Yeah, what?
Yeah. Basically he wore a dress, and I'm not even sure what it was for, like an editorial or like
Vogue
a
or
magazine.
something?
Vogue, yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
Vogue. And a bunch of people came out and were like, we need to go back to the time of like manly men and all this stuff. And I actually sent it in the family group chat because I thought it was so funny. But I follow this YouTuber who's Polish, and she is like a historian for like the way people dressed, fashion. There it is. That's that word. She's a fashion historian, and she goes through and like shows all these tweets about people like wanting men to be manly again. Isn't this so stupid? And then like goes throughout history where like traditionally men are like the more colorful and like wearing lots of different colors and dresses and high heels and giant wigs and like makeup and it's
tights
and like so many things that we like traditionally associate with like male or female femininity nowadays is actually rooted in like male fashion. Like historical male fashion.
I know you sent that video. I didn't watch it because I don't feel very passionate about it, so I was like, I don't really need it to be defended because I don't really care, like I already agree.
Yeah.
The way I feel about it is I think it's a little bit silly, the cry for the return to masculinity. And I also feel it's silly, the cry to make masculinity feminine. I think like most things we were talking about earlier, kind of eventually turn into the unconscious.
Mm.
I think that that's what's going to happen with outrage culture. It's like people are outraged when you wear a dress, and people are outraged when you don't wear a dress. And like we're very conscious about what everything means. And all the people are saying, hey, this guy needs to be masculine. Like what's happened to men? Look at this, this, that, and the other slur. And then the people on the other side are like, oh my gosh, you guys are so toxic masculinity, blah, blah,
Mm.
blah.
It's a
How
false
dare you?
dichotomy.
You're avoiding change. And I don't even know which one's right. But what I do feel like is that the outrage will eventually become the unconscious. As a society, it'll just kind of be like, yeah, we don't really care anymore. Like I personally saw that and I didn't think twice. I was not thinking, oh wow, this guy's dressed like a girl, what a pussy. And I also wasn't like, wow, how brave. It's just like
Yeah.
there's so much of that. There's so much, like
Yeah.
so much content being shoved at you from every single angle that like it's becoming unconscious. I saw it, I didn't even think about it. Like, oh yeah, here's that. I was like,
I mean,
how is
think
that
about how
different than
relevant tabloids were just a couple of years ago.
yeah. Like
Who
I don't
cares
know
about
how
that
that's
now?
different than any of the other 100 things I saw today. Like Dennis Rodman dressed as a girl in the 90s when he was married. And that was a huge deal. And now it's less of a deal. And to be
Yeah.
honest, I think it's just going to kind of fade away and people are going to stop
Yeah, like stop being.
throwing a fit.
Well, that's definitely my opinion, that we should just kind of like let other people exist.
Well, the masculinity thing, it's just a false dichotomy problem. I mean, not necessarily the astronomer and the astrologist, where like you have these two things and you have to decide, because there's more options. And especially in something like that, it's almost a sliding scale, and there's so much nuance involved depending on the individual, where it's like, yeah, you can be any amount of masculine or feminine that you personally want to be. Who cares?
Why would I care if another dude dresses in a dress? Like other dudes have sex with other dudes, and I don't care about that.
Yeah.
Like, why would I care about a straight dude wearing a dress? Like if if I was so against that, I would be against homosexuality, which I'm not.
Well,
like, why is it's not even a big deal to me? Like, it doesn't even cross my radar at all.
and we think, we figured it out. We've done it.
Yeah.
But if you try to think about what the toxicity of that idea would be, I'm thinking specifically of the quote that is something like, society thrives when old men plant trees that they will never sit in the shade of. Like the idea of, hey, just let everyone do whatever they want. Who cares what other people do is good, because we're moving away from an era of trying to enforce things on people. But maybe the reverse could be that if we move so far away that we don't care about what happens, our society can crumble.
Like I said earlier, like the kids who, the kids who grew up with just free love and whatever you want craved discipline. And that's that's the question that's been eating away at me, is like, how does what we see as finally the new age, we finally reached human potential, how will that appear toxic to our kids? Which it will.
I think a lot of people don't understand the symbiotic relationship that comes from conservative and progressive ideals, where society is held up by both of these things, and they think they're enemies. But without the other, they would ruin themselves. Like, for instance, the call of conservatism is to conserve, is to keep moving forward, is to preserve, is to tradition, to do the same thing, to add to this wealth of human knowledge. And that's good. And the call of progressivism is to change, to evolve, to move forward, to do new things, to break the status quo, to add wealth of knowledge from new experience, which is good. And when they work together, we have this platform of human knowledge, of conservatism. And every time it stays here for too long, we stagnate. If nothing changes, we don't move forward as a society. And progressives say, we're going to break the status quo, we're going to change things, we're going to explode, we're going to explore. And every time they do, the platform gets a little longer, because that gets accepted into conservatism. Rock and roll, not really pushing any boundaries nowadays, but when it came out, radically changed. Jazz, rap, whatever it is, those have all become normal. And so the platform grows, and so our society gets stronger. But without the progressives, it doesn't go anywhere. It never gets bigger because we just stay within the lines.
That's a really good explanation for that.
Yeah, you need both sides.
You need
in
both
order to
sides, yeah.
Progress.
If you don't question traditional gender roles, then that's all that exists. Those two, we stay within the lines. But if you do, and you take a risk, you take a chance, you ask new questions, then you could potentially break that down and recognize a community, a third, maybe fourth community of gendered people that we didn't have a word for before. And when it gets accepted into society, it's just going to be the new conservative talking point of 2046.
No, there's going to be a point when people come out on America's Got Talent and say like, hey, I'm transgender. And this judge is going to be like, yeah, so what?
Cool.
Like
Yeah.
Because it'll be conservative. It'll be
Right.
accepted, right?
Which is good,
Right.
normalized, but not special.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, we're going to break the mold about painting. You don't have to paint religious things anymore. You can paint real things. You can just paint reality, like a bowl of fruit. Wow, that's so cool. Is it? And then they just keep breaking that mold and thinking what's possible. So we have the Impressionist movement, we have the Cubist movement, we have modern art, all because someone said, this isn't everything. We could learn more, we can evolve.
Like
Yeah.
two parents, right? Like you said earlier,
Yeah.
you need two parents to have let the kids see different sides of the world.
Well, and
and you need two parents, two ideologies to govern a country, I think.
And if ever the other side wins and ruins the first side, the country collapses. Like we said, that you stagnate with just conservatism, but if you just have progressivism, revolutions every day, nothing is sacred, nothing is held. There's no farmers, there's no factory workers, there's nobody holding the line, doing an honest job for an honest day's work.
Life can't sustain.
Well, you know what I mean? There's no one upholding these traditions. There's no structure. There's no direction. There's no wealth of knowledge and science because everything is constantly being just turned over and removed and burned and changed.
Full circle.
Yeah, I really like that. I feel like I could talk all day. We got to do this another time because we have Casey's coming actually.
Oh yeah.
Oh, right.
I completely forgot she's coming in like an hour. But let's do this. Was awesome, you guys. I loved this. Let's do this again.